Welcome to the Deeplight podcast from Park City's Presbyterian Church. This is a space for community, healing, hope, and education around topics of rescue and growth. Our prayer for this series is that it illuminates a deeper understanding of struggles within and around us, as well as God's profound love and redemptive light in Jesus Christ. Hi, I'd like to welcome you to the next episode of the Deeplight podcast, a ministry of Park City's Presbyterian Church. I'm honored to be here today with Katherine and Jay Wolf. My name is Frances Mitchell, and we are currently in a series of cultivating beauty of the heart. What does that look like? It looks like things inside and outside. We have struggles within, and as you hear at the beginning of our podcast, every introduction, the prayer for this series is that it illuminates a deeper understanding of the struggles within and surrounding us. And so as we talk to Katherine and Jay today, we'll talk about what living with a disability looks like from the outside, but also, as you all say, the invisible wheelchairs that we all have and walk with. And I had the joy of getting to meet Katherine recently at a dear mutual friend's home. And as I sat and listened to you share your journey with the harsh reality of the struggle, but also with candor and humor and hope and everything in between, I sat there and thought to myself, this is the essence of Deeplight. We want to create a space and a place for community and healing and hope and understanding. And so it is our sincere joy and honor to have you all here today.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for having
We are so
us.
glad to be here.
We love Dallas.
So excited.
We love all you people. There's all these good worlds colliding for the Wolves.
That's right. We love Park City's Press,
feels
where
like
we
home.
are. What a great place.
Also,
We're
the
so happy you're
podcast name is so good, too. I think that this idea of treasures in the dark is something we talk a lot about. And so sort of that longing for light, but even in the depths, whether it's depths of darkness or just the deep and hidden places of our story. I love that. I love what that evokes. So well done.
There's just nothing too deep or too far down that is too far for God's light to reach.
Yep,
right,
That's
yeah.
beautiful. I love that.
So with that, I'd love for you all to share your journey, and your story, and how God has had a hand in every step of the way.
Sure.
Jay, you probably, you want me to
Oh, I didn't say after you. We're going to just point at each other.
No, you should. You're more succinct than I am.
You are right there. But anyway, we'll get it all done. So Katherine and I married out of college and moved to California on an adventure in our early married life and had a baby and just had this beautiful season of pursuing our dreams, but also being deeply rooted in our church community. And out of the blue, one ordinary day near the end of my law school time with a 6-month-old new baby in the home, Katherine suffered a massive brainstem stroke with no warning or history, symptoms really, and should have died. It was a massive malformation, this rare malformation called an AVM. It was the largest the neurosurgeon had ever seen, and surrounding her brainstem, and it was not a survivable scenario. But for whatever reason, the Lord sort of put it on his heart to give her a chance to live and to go into surgery. And she came out on the other side. They didn't know if she'd even wake up, but she was alive. And so that began this journey of a totally new normal and a story we never imagined that we would ever be living, a story of just this reality that life is so fragile and unsafe. And yet there is this thread of hope that can pull us all through and forward together. And so our church community, rallied for us. We had about 2 years of therapy and brain rehabs just for her to get kind of back up to a very low baseline of living. She didn't eat for a year, could hardly walk, could hardly sit up, could hardly talk, and just sort of, day by day, sort of clawed her way out of this pit, and with a whole village of people, and with me by her side too. And again, then we kind of came back and realized there was no going back after you've suffered. You just, everything's different. How you view the world is different. How you view your future is different. How you relate to community is different, all of it. And so now we had to figure out what we were going to do with this new life and this new story. And even having disability being a big part of the story, because half of Catherine's cerebellum was removed, and there was all this damage in her brain that was done in order to save her life, but it resulted in lifelong disability from not really being able to walk well by herself to paralysis on her right side, double vision, hearing loss, and then the reality is the story would continue. It's to this day, Catherine lives with neurovascular, meaning the system of blood in the brain, difficulties, malformations. She's had a separate aneurysm. She has continuing, just unknown, significant health scenarios. And so when we get on a stage and we share a message or write a book, like, it's not from being on the other side of a story that has now found its happy ending. It's like we're still in the middle of this story, which is us all, and navigating our way in the reality of life, finding that it is so hard, and yet there is goodness still because of what we know to be true about Jesus in our stories, what we know to be true about community in our stories, that we don't carry these burdens alone. So anyway, we could just wax poetic about this message that we feel God has left us on this earth to tell, to shine this light in the darkness. But that was 15 years ago. We celebrated the 15th anniversary last week.
Yeah, woohoo.
Which is wild. It's Catherine's second chance birthday, so we call it Catherine Live Day. So Catherine Live 15 was last week. That wasn't very succinct. I'm sorry.
No, it was. more than I would have been probably.
That's where we're at. But we're just happy to still be showing up in our marriage and our family. And I will say one other thing: we had a 6-month-old baby, and then about 7 years after the stroke, Catherine got cleared to have another baby. So we have, just these reminders of new life where there should only be death, which is again the gospel story with our big-eyed James and our miracle baby John. So family, it's beautiful, it's wild. Nothing's one note. We're just grateful that we still get to be here together.
I love that so much. One of the verses that I've clung to is Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans that I have for you. They're to prosper you, not to harm you, give you hope in a future. And some of the hope I think that we know is that we may be in shock. That was such an ultimate and definite day for you all. And the shock that came, the aftershock of the treatment and everything else. Yet we rest that was not a shock for God. He knew that, and he knew these plans. Something that I heard you say that I love is that you can dream new dreams.
That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about the process from that fateful day and your second birthday, your live day, and where you are now? As you mentioned, in a continual struggle, but also in a place where you are inspiring and touching and changing so many lives.
Oh gosh, well, it's a blessing and a holy burden. And as far as dreaming new dreams, so much of our life as children is having all these plans and all these goals and all these ideas of what life's going to look like. And then when it doesn't, the adult versions of ourselves are still waiting for those to come true and holding on to that with clenched hands and saying but no, I'm still waiting for my one fabulous dream from when I was 6 years old. And how many people do we know who tragically spend their whole lives waiting for their childhood dream to come true? I mean, what a sad way to live. I, for one, I imagine neither of you want to live that way, want to be on our deathbeds and wishing that 6-year-old Catherine's dream came true. Forget that. I got new dreams, and God has given us capacity to dream new dreams, to pivot into the story that we never thought we'd be living, and to thrive there and recognize how he is showing up in a life that looks nothing like we thought it would. And then take that a step further, we can dream new dreams and become emotionally agile, I call it, is develop that agility to go with it, live with open hands. And then when we do, we can choose to love it. We can decide this is actually the plan A of the story God is writing, and be overwhelmed. I mean, I feel that way in my story. Like, yes, there are hard things for sure. No one is denying that. And yet, why can't I decide this is a great story that God's writing? And I love this story. And no, this was not my childhood dream. And yet, I love this story for my life, and I'm wide awake to it. And I imagine that's where so much discontentment and so many of us adults feel, is we can't ever dream new dreams.
Well, we both turned 40 last year, and it's kind of, it's that milestone sort of midlife moment when you're like, oh, like, I wonder what I thought this would be, and for all of us, pretty much, it's like, just different. This is a different story than we thought we'd be living. Some things are way better and easier, and some things are just way crazy different than we ever could have imagined.
And more complicated.
And yet the question continues to be, like, here's the expectation of my life, here's the reality. And the farther the space between those two, the farther our discontent, the farther our suffering, the deeper our suffering. Can we often say, like, can we expect like less of this world, and like what we think it's going to complete or accomplish or satisfy in us? And sometimes we expect too much. But so can we adjust the expectation of what life and this painful, often broken world can be, and expect more of God? Because sometimes that's flipped, right? So like if we're trying to shrink this expectation gap, and the dreams that we might have had, that's part of our expectations, and it's a good thing to dream. But like, now I'm an adult. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm, like Paul says, like, when you're a child, you think like a child and, and speak like a child. But now, like, take on this maturity that's yours, whether you like it or not. Maybe you're 40 and you still think you're 20. Right. You're not, okay? You're 40. Wake up. And that's okay.
To be clear, there is a sadness in that.
There is a loss. There's a loss of innocence, a loss of...
13:11 is what you're quoting. That when you are a child, you think like a child. You speak like a child. You reason like a child. But then you become an adult, and not everybody does. But when you become an adult, if you become an adult, you put childish ways behind you. Right. And that's a tough pill to swallow.
Well, that's true. And it's worth saying there is loss in that. Like, I mean, when I think about our now 7-year-old, when he's lost all his teeth, I mean, there is like this, like, kind of breaks your heart, the reality of what it means to lose sort of that early just sense of wonder and goodness and simplicity and innocence in the world. And yet we know one day there will be sort of a full circle receiving of that again when we meet Jesus face to face, like when all of the suffering and pain of the world won't be a reality anymore. But that's not now. And so we long to, again, just adjust our expectations for this life in this world. We'll have trouble. And not just, John 16:33, it's like we'll have experiences that will shake us to our very core. Like we'll have earth-shattering, soul-rendering trouble. And we should expect that. And the storms of life are coming. It matters what we found our life on. But we know the end of the story. We know the rock that we can found our lives on. We know who has overcome it all. And so we can kind of throw our anchor, like with our ministry, an anchor is sort of the symbol, because that's an ancient anchor of symbol of hope, right? And so Hebrews 6:19 is this picture of our souls being anchored in heaven, in this sort of arc of a story that is a future reality. But because of Jesus, we get to live it out right now in the present, no matter what the storms are around us. It doesn't make the storms go away. It just means we have a grounded anchoring in something that transcends those storms. And so just for us, like that's what these 15 years have been about. How do we pivot? How do we redefine? How do we reset our expectations? How do we sort of empower ourselves to love a story by dreaming what's possible in this new story, even if it's one we could have never imagined when we were kids, And then in beautiful ways, God sometimes brings it full circle. Catherine talks about, when she was a kid, she was preaching to her dolls in the closet, and surely that would not be possible, right? When she wakes up from the stroke and can't speak and can't walk, and like surely you're not going to be able to live that dream, right? And yet over time, we just see now, like, God has given her a new version of that dream.
The wheelchair actually is like the vehicle for the new dream.
That's
It helps
right.
me get onto the stage, actually.
Yes.
So there's, just looking for this full circle, seeing the goodness of God in the land of the living, opportunities in our story. That's the light. That's the deep light. Of like,
Yes.
this feels like the end. Feels like the end of a dream.
Yeah.
Feels like the end of a season of what's possible, and yet, like, there's something there deep within, in the darkness even.
Yeah.
There's treasure. There's light. So keep moving forward towards that. Don't like deny that it's there. Try to fix it, or just like, oh, this is no big deal. Like there's grief and there's loss there, but like there's light there, deep within, and we get to kind of keep cheering each other on towards that light and towards that new vision of our story, our reality.
That's so neat, and I would love to just be there for a second and kind of ask you what the story behind Hope Heals is and everything that you all do. How did you get there? And I think I heard in a sermon once, a waiting season is not a wasted season. But I imagine that somewhere in your story, did you ever lose hope, or did you always know that this would be part of your story, that you would make a ministry out of it? What did that look like?
So the short answer is no, absolutely not. It would take years, 5 years at least, to even wrap our heads around this at all, to begin to put the pieces of life back together and then begin to dream dreams of any kind and new dreams. And during the first, probably 2008 to 2013, this first 5 years, it was survival mode, which it was surgeries and therapies and relearning to eat and walk and live in this world and begin to embrace being disabled, which was not a right-away thing. It was learning how to become a full-time caregiver and care receiver. It was definitely not like, yes, now we're going to go talk about it and write about it. And it was just, we got to live. And then in time, we turned to this page where it was like, oh, wait, we can't deny how much we are able to speak and share and instill the hope of Jesus into other people. And we're writing and people are reading, and just kind of happened that ministry ended up being where the Lord was taking us all along. And it wasn't automatic that I just wrapped my head around, oh, I'm now in the disability population, which seems so obvious. Like, yes, of course, you're in a wheelchair, yes. But my mind, our minds just couldn't get there yet. We were very much like, Catherine, uses a wheelchair now and then, but she's really still in the able-bodied community, and maybe Jay should just go be an attorney past the California bar. Let's do that. And, I'm a trophy wife, so that was in the cards too. I'm just kidding. But that's okay. Trophy wives are awesome too. Whatever.
You live your truth there. That's great.
But there was this sense throughout those early years that we so desperately needed what we didn't find out there, which was any sort of writing, speaking, ministry of hope for this story. And we realized, oh, we're going to need to create it.
Yeah.
And, we were reading any book we could get our hands on somebody who had a stroke and lived. And there was just very little stories, very, very little stories with any faith.
Wow.
And almost no stories that ended well. I mean, a light Google search would tell you pretty much you're going to get divorced, your life is going to totally fall apart, your finances will be ravaged, and everyone will leave because no one can handle your life now. and nothing will continue. You'll never have another child. Doomsday was the reality of what the world is telling you comes from this story.
Sure.
And we just wanted to be a part of writing a different narrative. And that's really the opportunity that we all have in our lives, is let's write a new narrative of how to suffer well and how to, change up this obsession with seeking only what we thought it would look like. And I could really only share when things were easy. And, that's stupid. And what if this story is actually one where God is most glorified? And what if that's part of the conversation?
Yeah, I think, too, you realize over years the dust settles when you've been through trauma or whatever. You've got to find a way to healing, right? And it always comes communally. Obviously we do the work with ourselves as individuals, but I think the work of healing is about a community coming around side, giving you a vision. When you can't hope for yourself, that the community says, we're going to hope for you until you can hope for yourself again. That's what the body of Christ is activated to do in suffering. And so for us, I think we had this story. We didn't know how God might use it, what we were supposed to do with it, how to be good stewards of it. Bad things happen to people all the time. What's different about us? We don't know. And yet we just felt like this calling that we had been left here, that our marriage, our family had been left here. And we wanted to bear witness to what God had done in our life so that other people might find a way forward in their own pain. And it was kind of initially for stroke survivors and just people in our very specific story, but then we just realized it sort of was beginning to be this opening that sort of created a universal experience of what God can do in the midst of our pain. And so we're all trying to find healing, but we have seen, and I believe you can't find healing for yourself until you're a part of somebody else's healing. It's almost like if there were steps of a process of healing, like there are of grief. You've got to sort of work through this evolution, but part of healing is being a part of somebody else's healing. And most often that happens when it's those places where you've been hurt, where you've been wounded. The worst parts of your story are the easiest place to connect with other people, and the worst parts of theirs as you look towards healing together. So we often talk about, again, that Hope Heals is like this offering of ours to just say, here's what we found and here's what we're looking for, and will you join us? And it's changed our life, but that jump back to those places of our wounding is what most of us don't want to do. Because I would love to never think about brain rehab again. It was some of the darkest years of our life, some of the darkest interactions with the people who were also in the worst nightmares of their life, with disability and with stroke surviving, all these things. And so name your deepest place of pain, any of us. If you believe it, I think God is calling us all to return to those places with the healing we've received, to be sources of healing for other people who are there still. And in so doing, then we get healed more too.
Well, and what's so bizarrely incredible, it's like God made it this way, it majorly fills you and fuels you. You think, honestly, and you probably wouldn't say this out loud, but when you're going through terrible trauma, I don't care if I'm blazing a trail. I don't care if somebody else is going to benefit, some stranger is going to benefit from this. This is terrible. I don't want this for my life. And then you kind of get a little more down the road and you start to realize I am this living survival guide. I'm writing the playbook here for people I don't even know. And it changes your brain. It truly is the beautiful truth of 2 Corinthians 1, that we comfort others with the comfort that we ourselves have received. And it's this cycle, and it fills you, and it's super life-giving. And you're like, I gotta keep living this out well, because it matters. The person I don't even know, or maybe that I do know, maybe it's your own family that gets to go with you on blazing this new trail. And it is extremely life-giving in a way you can't really imagine until you do it.
Yeah. Well, telling your story too makes you want to live it better. And I think sometimes that's feels, that's is that inauthentic? Or, what's your motivation for that? It's like, well, when we put this story out there, I want to keep creating a story that's beautiful and redemptive and hopeful and helps other people, and that is real and it's authentic and that's not just one note. And so I think part of all of our opportunities is to say, what is the story that you're telling yourself about yourself? What is the story God's written in your life? And then to tell it to other people, because a friend of ours, Kurt Thompson, who's a brilliant resource just in the space of attachment theory, in the space of therapeutic, just like family systems and connection, and all threaded through with Christ. And he's one of our favorite teachers and dearest friends, but talks a lot about this fact of like, when you tell your story to an empathetic listener, it changes your neuro pathways to believe that story more fully and to then have courage to continue living it out. So for us, over these 10 years especially of ministry and doing Hope Heals, like, man, what a gift it's been to us to be able to tell our stories to all kinds of communities, all kinds of empathetic listeners who are receiving our worst moments and our most hopeful moments, and sort of like we get to then want to live it better, and we get to believe those things that we have learned that maybe on a stage we're like, you know what, I'm not sure. It's pretty hard to believe that now that I say it in this moment, but I think I believe it now again, and I'm preaching to my own heart again. And so I think there's such power to all of us getting out of the natural tendency to just sort of isolate and feel like, nobody would understand this story. It's too shameful. It's too bad. It's too dark. It's too different, or like they just wouldn't, or it doesn't matter because it's not that big of a deal compared to other things. But it's like, can we just be vulnerable in a community of fellow wounded healers, which Henry Nouwen says, which we love that idea. That's Jesus. Like, he comes back and he shows the scars still, like there's a woundedness that we all carry, but we can still be healers. And so can we, take that wounded healer mentality and share our lives and share our stories in a way that will encourage others to live it well, but also encourage our hearts again to keep believing that it's true.
Yes, and find purpose in the pain. And I love what you say. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
And so just linking that and trusting that the Lord had that purpose for you and has it, and seeing that lived out so faithfully. Can you talk to us a little bit about marriage? What it's been like, and guidance for, struggle comes in all shapes and sizes, and you can see it and you can't see it. What has marriage been like? What guidance would you give to married couples?
It's hard. We don't like to give marriage advice because we're still figuring it out. We're like
We're humbled.
TBD.
What's your secret sauce?
Yeah, what's the secret sauce? We'll tell you. We'll tell you if we make it.
Oh my gosh, no kidding.
I'm kidding. We're going to make it. And I think that's part of it. You just decide you're in this life together. You really do. There's something to that. Like, fake it till you make it. So maybe when we're 80, we will have made it. But yeah, I think one of the things that we are both able to do is keep perspective. That's one of the great gifts of deep suffering when you're young and young married, is that when our life blew up, we'd been married just over 3 years. So now, here we are 18 and a half, and there's been many more storms, but nothing comes close to that one in some ways. In other ways, as other legitimate storms have come, we've seen God show up, and we've seen us live and survive and thrive in the hard story. So I think it's a muscle memory too. If we can do it again.
Sure.
And there's something very much to when suffering hits a couple, the tendency can be to run away from it instead of run to each other in it. And I think that's probably extremely important, is we're in this together, and whatever we're up against together instead of up against each other. I think that's probably a very valuable distinction in marriage.
Yeah, I mean, so much of marriage, I think, is about this, again, this expectation gap. It's about this letting feelings be sort of maybe a signpost, but not the full driver of your life. So it's like, I'm not always feeling, wanting to be a caregiver. Catherine's not always feeling wanting to be taken care of,
I'm not
and
always
like
feeling my Uber driver.
5 stars.
5 stars.
but the reality is like we get to override those emotions.
Yeah.
Especially with the Holy Spirit in us. We get to have these fruits that are otherworldly, that are not just like our fleshly go-to. To say like, I'm not feeling it, but I can still live in joy and love and self-control. And I think so often disability and caregiving is sort of like, has a really beautifully structured path towards that. Like we talk about often, like we might have had a fight, but at night I have to help Catherine's eye, that she has no feeling on the eye, and there's facial paralysis, so the eye can't protect itself. The eye doesn't fully close. So every night I have to wash it out and put a contact in and put this gel in and help recover.
The contact's like a prosthetic.
Yeah, just like a covering. And so
covering.
the point is like, I can't just go slam the door and leave and be like, like huff off. I'm like, I have to.
Or I can't. I can't just run out of the room.
That's right. Well, the point is like we act and care because that's what is needed.
Right.
And the rhythm of sort of acting in love, even if you're not always feeling it, has eroded sort of some of the hardness of heart into this reality of like, but I do, now I even love her more because I've kind of, again, taken those steps over
To choose
all
it.
these years to choose it, to just say, you know what, I'm not feeling it, maybe I'm hurt, maybe I'm mad, like, maybe I don't want to, but like, I'm gonna choose to do the loving thing, and then it has created love, and vice versa. I mean, that's just the work of marriage. And I think also, I love the idea that, when we marry each other, there's a whole universe that we don't even understand or know of what we're getting into. And that's the point. That's why we're covenanting. It's not like, here's all the terms of every detail of what you're getting in this transaction, because that's not what this is. This is to say, I don't know. I don't know at all.
That, like, and maybe this is Tim Keller's meaning of marriage again, that you always marry a stranger, because eventually the person you wake up next to has become a different person time and time again.
Exactly.
So it's always like you marry a stranger and learn to love the stranger.
Right. I mean, and so Catherine, when we married, she didn't know she had this incredible ticking time bomb in her brain. No idea. And like literally under the veil, it's kind of, and there's so much about me that she didn't know and I didn't know. And it's like, we got to choose, despite not knowing the full picture of what we were getting into, to show up and learn to love a new person. And that's true for all of us. I mean, we don't even fully know ourselves, so how could somebody else even fully know what they were getting into, what life will look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And I think then you add in things like, maybe parenthood or big trauma or medical crisis, and you become a different person on the other side of that. Suffering changes you. So if you have these evolutions as a person and as a marriage, like, so often people are just like, that's not what I signed up for.
Right.
And like, so I'm not going to be able to keep showing up because that's not what I signed up for. And instead of saying like, this is something that is bigger than myself, this sum of the parts is a witness to the world of God's love and of this way that Jesus says he's not going anywhere no matter what in our lives, in our stories. So in our marriage, we get to give that to each other and roll over in bed and be like, who is this? What happened? Like, I don't even recognize my life or you. But I'm going to choose to learn to love a new person. And the reality is they're doing the same thing for you. They're like, who is that? And like, it's a mutual learning to love somebody new that I think changes, it just shifts that perspective. It's like, it's a dreaming the new dreams. It's really, it all links up. It's like you have the opportunity to step into a story you didn't imagine you'd be living. And again, with a lot of caveats of like, there are absolutely times when sort of this picture of Christian marriage has been like twisted to condone abuse and horrible things. And like, that's of course not what we're talking about. We're just talking about, in typical, the hardship of life together and marriage together and how we change over seasons and years. Like, of course we won't be feeling it in the same way. Of course it might think like we didn't sign up for this, but we get to learn to love a new person and learn to love what must be done too, which like we don't always feel like we, want to do all the day-to-day of like keeping a relationship healthy and putting our needs aside for the cause and the good of somebody else. But like,
Yes.
yeah, there's this rhythm that's really beautiful, and then it really does soften our hearts over time to say, wow, I can't believe we still get to do this together, you know. And
Yeah.
it's as hard as it is, like it's a miracle to be married and to be on this mission together. Like what a beautiful story we're getting
Yeah.
to live out still.
And what I hear you saying is, and talking to, is the choice in victory over victimhood. And that's not to say that
Yeah.
there wasn't victimization in
Right.
this story or anyone's story, and that's not to say that victory looks perfect,
That's
right? But your story is one of courage and resilience, and I'd love to ask you as a parent myself,
Yeah.
how would you recommend helping impart those qualities of courage and resilience on our children?
Oh, listen, we'll let you know if we figure it out.
I know we're like, we
I'm
don't write a
asking you all the
parenting or
secrets of
marriage
life.
book.
Well, it's so important.
humbling.
It's how do we
Yes.
teach our children?
Yeah.
Yeah, all the things. We don't know the answer for sure. But we definitely have started just putting a lot of words around hard things. I
Yes.
think so much of our culture is allergic to hard things, or even
Yes.
talking about the reality of hardship in life. And it's so clear throughout the Bible, there will be trouble in this world. And suffering leads to perseverance, character, hope. Like, why are we kind of skipping all that and acting like life's just going to be perfect and very comfortable and easy for you, little prince. And we have started very much narrating, even to the degree of kind of coming up with this little motto that God made you to do the hard thing in the good story he's writing in your life. And we say that a lot to our children, that God made them to do hard things in the good story. And we feel like that notion of good, hard living is what children deeply need to be resilient, to cultivate courage, is Jesus is with you, and with him on your team, you can, in fact, endure hard things, because greater is he in you than he who is in the world. And he is supplying every need you have, Philippians 4:19, that he is ultimately going to be in the moments that are uncomfortable, so you don't have to be afraid to engage the uncomfortable. Because that's what us adults need to hear.
Yes.
Is we have capacity to endure hard things, and moments change. That this may be a really bad chapter in your story, but it's not the full story. And everybody's so living for the moment that the moment has to feel good. And so, like, we're hopefully teaching some grit that you can endure hard things. And I think that's so important for us to teach our children.
Yes.
Yeah, we talk a lot about compassion with our kids too, and that looks like
Which, yes, compassion too.
compassion for others.
Yeah.
You know, encountering hard stories, like even the camp we can talk about in a minute, is this community of people with all variety of really hard stories. And I think we created it for many reasons, but our kids are one of the main reasons we did, because we wanted them to have a vision of all the different variations of pain in this world, but all the different variations of joy in the midst. And perspective, you know, is key. And like saying, just because you had a really hard thing happen, again, there is this possibility of victory, or you can choose a different path. You can choose that this is the worst thing that's ever happened. I'm a victim. I should be entitled to better and more. And like, how do we just shift, especially for our, you know, our young guys? Like, just, I want you to be a man in the world that runs towards suffering. I think Mr. Rogers says, like look for the helpers. Like, I want you to be one of those helpers, like in the world, because the world is not probably going to get any easier, you know, just like globally, like in the arc of history, like it's probably going to just keep getting harder and crazier. And can you feel empowered to do the hard thing because God is in you? He's equipped you with everything you need. You're not alone in it. There's a community. And can you run into and toward the suffering of others, even though you've had a lot of suffering yourself? And it would be understandable to just be like, I don't need any more junk. I've got enough on my own. But to say like, compassion is really about not just sort of feeling sorry for, pitying, even empathizing. It is about co-suffering, like compassion, the root word, like the passion of the Christ, passion is to suffer, and compassion is to suffer together. And so could you be a human, an adult that says like, I want to get under the weight of the world with people who are suffering, myself included, and like together we're going to lift up the weight of the world a little bit, of all of us collectively. So I think that's our prayer for them, and not knowing what storms might be ahead. And of course, as a parent, that's just, again, there's this loss of innocence. There's this like bittersweetness to the reality of like, man, our parents didn't think 3 years after we got married, like we would be hit with this insane storm and this sort of upheaval in our, future. And I don't know for our kids either. It's hard, you try not to live sort of in the PTSD of that. Like, it's just, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Like, you don't want to sort of impute that on them, even though we well know, I mean, it's so fragile. Things can happen in an instant that change everything. And so how do we sort of let them go into an unsafe world and be the helpers, be these lights of compassion in the world, take the healing they've received and go give it away. So that's the hope. And again, encountering hard stories of other people is a way to do that, and when age appropriate, of course, but like to not be afraid of that, not to say, I don't know the answers about this, but I want to sit and, give the ministry of presence and tears to people. And for me, like I'm an attorney by trade, training, and I don't practice at this point, but I'm an advocate, I'm an arguer, I like to talk it out, and so sometimes for my boys too, it's just like, and Catherine is like having a moment of peace. She's like, I'm like, move on. But one parenting hack, maybe this for somebody, but just this, it's really an open-handedness posture, but it's like, tell me more. Yeah. For our 15-year-old that is just, really feeling all the feels and struggling, trying to find his place, and just, we think he should know all the things by now, but he's 15. Okay, his brain's got some years left to cook. So it's like he shouldn't have it all together, but I shouldn't have it all together for him yet.
Right.
And like he knows the end of this story that God has written on his heart, and he has seen it in community, he's seen it with his family, and it's all in there. But I just, I don't know. That's a side note. Parenting notion that's meant a lot to me is instead of just trying to put all the words and answers over him, and sort of talk over him and sort of help make sure he knows all the right things and ideas, like just tell me more about the story God's writing in your life. It might be, it's hard, a story, but it's a good story, but tell me more of it. And so kind of empowering our kids to be the narrators of their own story and still believing that it's a really good story that they're part of.
How incredible. And I love the way that you talk about the connection with community through that and the encouragement to your boys to find that community. And what's so cool is you all both found and created a community. So I'd love for you to talk about camp.
Oh yeah, golly, camp has really transformed our lives.
Wow.
It's as important at this point as anything else in our world.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's not something weird to say. As important
it really is.
I mean, besides Jesus, it's right up there with the most important things in our life. And camp is this crazy, beautiful, somewhat like magical and enchanting just departure from normal life. We bring families where someone has a disability, but the whole family can come to camp for free for a week for this amazing vacation-like experience is how I best can summarize it. We make it extremely special and do things like spa day for the ladies and cookouts for the men, and it's really like these multiple camps happening at once of children and adults and people with disabilities and volunteers, and it's crazy. It's super Yeah, it's sacred. It really is. And we didn't realize when we started this camp that the level of joy would be through the roof. We thought, when you gather a bunch of people together with a whole lot of just bad stuff happening on the outside of their bodies, amputations, wheelchairs with major, awful diagnoses, and, people being buried year to year, campers being buried. We did not assume that what would come out of these meetings is joy. Like, surely there's not a lot of joy in this situation. And we realized there is much more joy than in the outside world. That it's crazy that somehow all these people with all these problems on the outside provide this level of freedom for us all. So we've got really bad stuff, and it's really clear. So it's almost like we moved past that already. Yeah, life is rough. So now let's celebrate being together and being in this place and have a fabulous week. And it's almost like it took the pressure off to be perfect.
Yeah.
Which kind of is how
powerful.
every community should be.
Right.
I think it's what's possible for the church. We all have baggage, and we're church people and love the church. But there is this possibility of gathering, not just in spite of our pain, but because of it, as this pathway to sort of the kingdom of God. And that's what camp has become. And we didn't know before Katherine became disabled, and even actually several years into that, people with disabilities are the largest minority group in the world, and they're the most unchurched people group in the world, and the highest per capita rates of homelessness, divorce, suicide, depression. Just the story of disability is a really, really hard story. And to add insult to injury, then most of the time, whether it's just subconscious or how, I don't know, we don't want to think about our mortality, we don't talk about disability. People with disabilities are kind of invisible. It's the world is not made for us, is what people with disabilities often think and feel. And disability advocates, that terminology is just this is a world not made for us. And so with camp, we wanted to say, if the world out there is not made for you, we wanted to make a world here that is made for you. And in so doing, it's made for all of us. Because when we create even sacred space that is universally designed, quite literally, and the table is set for all of us, then we all benefit. We all connect in a different way. And I think really for the church and for our culture, if the story of disability, which is one, as Katherine has said, that ties us together universally with what it means to be human, what it means to have a life that a story you can't write the end to. You don't know what might happen tomorrow. Yeah. There may be, whether you want to acknowledge that or not, the story of disability brings all that to light. Wow, I didn't think that would be how it goes. And you have a stroke out of the blue and everything changes. And so there's a lot that we bear witness to when we bear witness to the story of disability, but we are missing something vital in the story of the church, in the story of our faith, in the story of our culture, if we don't have a seat at the table for the story of disability, because we're not fully understanding what it means to be human, what it means to be alive, what it means to struggle and need help in community, what it means to have joy even in the midst of your pain. There are lessons that are transcendent for us all through the story of disability, but sometimes we haven't even made a place at the table for that story. And it's to our own detriment. And so it continues to inspire us. Our new mission statement with Hope Heals is that we're creating sacred spaces for families experiencing disability, but really sacred spaces for interability community. And it's changed everything. Again, it's given us a reason to keep stepping into an unknown future for ourselves, to show up with joy, even when it hurts and even when there's just a lot weighing on us. It's changed everything. So again, and it's what's amazing is we started this little camp. It's in Alabama for now. I mean, maybe one day we'll, God willing, have our own facility, retreat center. I don't know that we can do this year round, but for now we do it for several weeks in the summer. And we kind of thought it would just be a regional thing, and it ended up that we've had people from 40 states and the UK and Canada, and just sort of this incredible gathering place of people with all kinds of broken hearts, but looking for healing and hope in the midst. And
Wow.
Yeah, and then we have volunteers, kind of a one-on-one situation. So what we use the terminology is there's a mutuality of ministry. It's not just like, okay, I'm going to volunteer, I'm going to come and help this, sad situation. This person who really needs me. It's like I'm going to come alongside my friend, and I'm going to open the door if they need it, but I'm going to learn from them too. It's this blurring of the lines that I think has been profound. So a lot of times we'll have families who have come as campers, so somebody has a disability, and then the next year they'll say that I was so encouraged and filled up and empowered that I want to now serve as a volunteer.
Wow.
So again, it's a really unique, I think, just picture of the kingdom. It's like
so
the lines are
amazing.
blurred, and we all have a seat at the table.
Yeah. So can you tell us, how do you apply to be a camper? How can you volunteer? And how can we support?
Sure.
That's a
So
thing.
everything's hopehillscamp.org
Okay.
or hopehills.com/camp
Yep.
or Instagram, Hope Hills Camp.
Okay.
all the ways.
You can find out all the things there about how to come as a camper and apply, or how to apply to serve as a CC, we call them compassionate companion, or how to donate. The camp is totally free to all our campers, so we have to raise a bunch of money every year. Praise God, we're doing it.
With a lot
but
of
we
joy.
need
It's
help.
been amazing.
It's
Yeah.
been a joy, but we need support always. And
In our shop too, we have a online shop, kind of been this idea
yeah,
of Ebenezer's, just for physical reminders, like tangible reminders of God's goodness, how far He's brought us and how far He will continue to. So we have a really
amazing.
interesting kind of curated shop, but all the proceeds benefit camp.
Yes.
So
Well, for anyone who's watching, I've got this Hope Heals sweatshirt. If you're not watching, it is the softest sweatshirt.
Yeah, it's
I
our
put it on
favorite.
right when I went home last night. I will live in it.
that's
Good.
amazing.
And we also
Good.
have Katherine and Jay's book. They've got how many books out now?
Two.
Books, and we
A
actually
third
just
one next
signed on
year.
for 3 more. So there'll be more books
Congratulations.
by the wolves in the world, which we're grateful
Incredible.
for.
And
It's- yeah.
All the proceeds support the camp.
Yeah, if you
is
get
that
anything
correct?
on the shop that you buy online, or if you come see us speak at an event and we have books there, there's that all kind of fuels
Amazing.
the cause. So yeah, thanks
Okay.
for asking. Again, it's kind of it took a while to get kind of comfortable asking for support or help, but I
Yes.
mean now
Yeah.
it's such a transformational joy. It's like with such excitement.
believe it.
You get
Yeah.
you get to be a part of this too. You get to donate. Can you
Yes.
believe it? You get to
Yes,
donate. It's
right.
amazing. So
Right.
it's been a really neat kind of evolution to just say, wow, what a cool thing to invite people. We might never know this side of heaven to participate, to be partners in this work and making the kingdom of God come alive
That's amazing.
in this world. So
And you have more exciting things in the works. Will you tell us a little bit about the coffee shop for all of our friends in Atlanta?
Oh, yes, sure. So truly a sacred space to come. Opening this October, we hope October 1st, we think, or 2nd, we'll see. In the heart of Buckhead, in the heart of Atlanta, we will have MEND, 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 because what we get to do as believers is be a part of mending this broken world. We get to be a part of putting that human fabric that gets torn back together. And we see the population of people with disabilities being among the most under-resourced across the board of any in our world. They, particularly as people with disabilities age out of systems, their peer groups shrink like crazy to aging caregivers and paid workers if they even have those. And so we want to employ people with disabilities and pay them a livable wage and give them community. And then we want our space to be a space of inter-accessibility, we call it, where people of all abilities can come and just really have this new paradigm for what every business in America should do, which is make your space truly accessible, not just on paper, like
Right.
checking off ADA when in
compliant,
reality that doesn't begin to cut what accessibility needs to look like to actually resource a person with disabilities.
Well, and it's back to that idea of like, it's not that hard. It doesn't cost that much more if you do it with intentionality on the front end. If you say, I'm going to make a place here at this table for everybody. So the space will, again, not just employ people with disabilities, but be for customers of all abilities too. And we're just so grateful. Again, it's kind of a out of the box, maybe next project for Hope Heals, but in some ways it's so natural because we have this camp that we rent and then we leave. You know, Katherine and I will come speak somewhere and then leave. And so this will be our first sort of tangible manifestation, our a community hub for Hope Heals that you can come, you know, make your pilgrimage from Dallas or wherever and come to mend coffee and goods. And what's really neat too is through this network of folks actually around PCPC and friends in Dallas, we met a woman who is an interior designer focused on accessibility, named Shelley Rosenberg, and she became a great friend. And so she is actually working with us on the interior design. So we wanted, again, to make a space that we would want to go to, like, you know, like that we'd want to go have like work in or meet a friend at for coffee or go get our just morning run of coffee in. And, you know, a place that's beautiful, a place that brings, again, this sort of light in the dark places. You know, just because something has maybe a disability focus doesn't mean it has to be sterile or like kind of lower level or kind of just the crumbs.
Beautiful, just not aesthetically like high level.
And what it translates is it says to anybody who walks in the door that you're worth this. Like you were worth making this place for you and making it beautiful and making it healing and being intentional about the details of it because you're worth it. And maybe the world might not be giving you that message. You may be feeling invisible in the world's eyes, but we want to, through the power of Jesus, say, like, we see you because he sees us and we believe you're worth it because, again, that worthiness has been given to us. And so that's our little offering. And we, with a lot of humility, but also excitement, think it might be the first of many. I could see one in Highland Park or wherever parks. I don't know. We
want to make that happen.
Let's have another mend near here. But thanks for asking. We're really, we're just grateful, again, to kind of just over these years, it's been 10 years of ministry full time for both of us, to just see where God's evolved this thing that was this tragedy in a woman's life, a marriage, a family. And we often say the breaking of our hearts was the making of our hearts. And I think that's possible for all of us, again, in this, you know, in this world, it will give you some pain that you never imagined. And yet it will give you some joy and hope that you never imagined either. And
beauty from the ashes.
Yeah, it's possible. So we're just, grateful to keep talking about it and keep dreaming about it. Keep making a place for us all at the table.
Incredible.
Thanks for having us at this table.
It's with
today.
Extreme gratitude that we thank you all for being here. Is there anything as we come to a close that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure we cover?
Was there? Who knows?
We covered a lot of ground.
I think we did.
One final encouragement that I love to give to anyone who will listen is there is a way for us all to think about God's goodness as already being inside of us when we know Jesus, not outside of us. So when tragedy strikes, the first thing we are not thinking is God's goodness is here with me, because we've wrongly defined what good is. We've identified good as something outside, that good is when life is good, instead of God is already good to me. And in believing that, we are saying, I believe that the joy and the peace and the assurance and the presence of God is already here. So I am safe in him regardless of what's happening in the physical world. And I think that's a super valuable distinction that tragically our world is not making. We see good things as when life is good and don't correctly define goodness.
That's great.
What an incredible note to end on. And if you are struggling and are in pain and looking for community and healing, we encourage you to reach out to us at 214-224-2500, or you can email us at deeplight@pcpc.org. Jay, you said something last night that community is about making an invisible God visible. And that's what we are here for. And that has been a lot of the mission, again, of this podcast, is to talk about the hard things. We can talk about brokenness in a lot of different ways, but to really dig into the specifics of what that can look like, and yet God's presence in all of it. So thank you again so much for being here today.
Our
We
pleasure.
will
Thanks for having us.
check out in our show notes. There will be links to everything, the book, the camp, the sweatshirt that I'm newly obsessed with, and all the Bible verses that we talked about today. This just has been a very impactful time with you guys, and we hope that it reaches so many in a time of need and healing too. So thank you guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Deep Light podcast from Park Cities Presbyterian Church. We would love for you to be our guest this Sunday morning as we gather together for worship at 8, 9:30, or 11 a.m. We are located in the Uptown Dallas area at the corner of Oaklawn Avenue and Wycliffe Avenue. To find out more, please visit pcpc.org.